The silence of the dim hospital corridor shattered as a baby's cry echoed through the sterile walls, startling Emma, who gripped her chest as if the sound pierced her soul. Emma said, "That cannot be. I was never supposed to hear this cry." The nurse, a weary woman with trembling hands, whispered a name that froze Emma's blood, a name she thought belonged to the shadows of her past. Emma staggered backward, her breath uneven, while a distant courtroom memory flashed of a man, Daniel, being told a truth no father should learn this way. Daniel said, "What do you mean a child exists, a child that carries my blood?" His voice thundered with disbelief, shattering what little calm remained. The truth was no longer a secret buried in lies. It was alive, breathing, crying. Emma felt as though the ground beneath her had betrayed her, pulling her into a nightmare she never chose. She gasped, "This is not real. This cannot be my fate." Yet the cry persisted, relentless, undeniable, a haunting anthem of a story that had already begun without her consent. The opening left no space for denial, only the unbearable weight of destiny pressing into her chest. Emma's knees weakened as the nurses whispered. Name echoed through her ears, a ghost resurrected from her past. Emma said, "No, you cannot mean that. This is not possible." Yet the baby's cries defied denial, pulling her deeper into despair. The corridor seemed to shrink around her, suffocating her with sterile air that smelled of antiseptic and sorrow. Memories of abandonment surged, colliding with the sound of life demanding her attention. She pressed her palm harder to the wall, whispering to herself, "Why now? Why me?" Her world had been fragile, already broken by betrayal, and now fate thrust a child into her lap like a cruel joke. The cry was not just a sound. It was a summons, an unavoidable truth clawing its way into her heart. Daniel's courtroom scene replayed in Emma's mind like a nightmare stitched into reality. The judge's gavel struck as if sealing a sentence she had no power to change. Daniel said, "You hid this from me, a child that bears my blood?" His rage shook the room, his voice echoing off the oak walls. Emma could almost feel his fury bleeding into her veins, binding her to the same fate. She whispered, "This is not my choice, yet it becomes my burden." Each word in that courtroom had carved wounds that now resurfaced with the baby's cries. The nurse stood trembling, her presence both fragile and accusing, her eyes heavy with guilt. Emma wanted to demand answers, yet her voice was lost in the baby's cries. The nurse whispered, "This child was never supposed to cross your path." Emma staggered forward, words catching in her throat. "Why? Why me?" Her hands trembled, heart racing, as though fate had chosen her against her will. The weight of the secret pressed into the sterile corridor, filling the silence between each cry. The baby's cry grew louder, closer, no longer an echo, but a presence demanding recognition. Emma's chest rose and fell in ragged gasps, her legs moving unwillingly toward the sound. She whispered, "If I look, everything changes. If I see, there is no turning back." Her words dissolved into the sterile night air. The nurse's silence was deafening, a refusal to soften the blow of destiny. Emma's steps carried her forward, though every fiber of her being screamed to run. She reached the doorway, the cry just beyond. Emma sat in the dim hospital waiting room, her body trembling as she tried to anchor herself against the tide of memories rising within her. The baby's cry lingered in her ears like an echo of unfinished grief. Emma said, "Why am I the one who hears it? Why me?" Her voice broke as her mind replayed childhood wounds, the feeling of being abandoned and discarded like a mistake. The fluorescent light above flickered, bathing her in cold blue tones that sharpened her loneliness. Emma remembered how her mother once whispered promises she never kept, leaving Emma with scars she carried into adulthood. Her chest ached, not only from the present but from every betrayal stitched into her past. She pressed her hands together, whispering, "This child, it is not mine, yet it tears me apart as if it were." Tears welled but did not fall, suspended in the fragile balance between denial and surrender. She knew the child was not simply a presence. It was a mirror forcing her to face wounds she had buried too deep. Daniel's words from the courtroom replayed with brutal clarity, cutting into Emma's chest like glass. Daniel said, "You hid a truth that should have been mine, and now you ask me to believe in nothing but pain." The memory was not hers to own, yet it had been grafted into her reality, inseparable from the baby's cry. Emma whispered, "I never chose this burden, yet it claims me with every breath." She thought of the future, of the child's innocence crashing against her own shattered reflection. The waiting room's silence was heavy, only broken by the hum of old lights and the distant sound of life she was too afraid to embrace. She clutched her coat tighter around her body, as if armor could hold back the storm inside her. Her soul trembled with fear, with longing, with shame, all colliding at once. She feared she could never be enough, yet the child's existence forced her to confront the truth. She would either rise or collapse beneath its weight. The nurse returned quietly, her steps soft, her gaze heavy with unspoken truths. Emma forced herself to meet her eyes, though her body shook with dread. The nurse whispered, "Some burdens are not chosen, they are given." Emma said, "But why to me? What have I done to deserve this?" The nurse lowered her head, her silence more damning than any words. Emma felt exposed, her scars visible under the fluorescent glare, every wound of her past demanding to be acknowledged. Her throat tightened, her hands clenched until her nails pressed into her palms. She wanted to run, to escape the weight of destiny, yet her feet felt trapped by invisible chains. Emma whispered again, softer now, "What if I fail? What if I cannot save what was never meant to be mine?" The silence that followed was suffocating, and the cry of the baby pierced it once more, louder, closer, impossible to ignore. Emma's mind spiraled back to her childhood, to nights when she cried alone, waiting for someone who never came. She whispered, "I swore I would never be like them, never abandon what was mine." Yet here she was, confronted by a baby whose presence broke her in places she thought had healed. The fluorescent lights above flickered again, as though mocking her fragile resolve. Her hands trembled as she clutched her coat, her heart pounding against her ribs like it wanted to escape. The nurse's eyes were filled with sorrow, but Emma could not bear to look at them. She pressed her forehead against her palms and whispered, "I do not want this, but maybe I need this." Her breath caught as she realized the truth. The child was not only a weight but a chance to confront the ghosts that had haunted her for years. The cry grew louder, and Emma knew denial was slipping away. The door at the end of the corridor creaked open, and the nurse gestured silently toward it. Emma's heart raced as she rose, each step weighted with fear and inevitability. She whispered, "If I see that child, I will never be the same." Her voice cracked, her body shuddering. The nurse said softly, "Fate does not ask permission, it simply arrives." Emma's hand hovered near the doorknob, her breath shallow, her eyes wide with terror and longing. She whispered, "This is the moment everything changes." Behind the door the cry rose once more, sharp and insistent, a demand that could not be ignored. Her trembling hand reached forward, the cold metal against her skin sealing her destiny. She paused, her heart pounding so violently it hurt, then pushed the door slowly open. Emma stepped into the nursery, her heart pounding as her eyes fell on the baby sleeping beneath pale blankets. The sight pierced her, stirring wounds she thought long buried. Emma whispered, "Why do I feel her pain as if it were my own?" The air felt too heavy, suffocating her with truths she never sought. Behind her, Daniel's voice broke the silence like thunder. Daniel said, "This child is not yours to claim. You think love will fix what lies destroyed." His words stabbed, dripping with venom. Emma's lips trembled, but her gaze clung to the child, fragile yet demanding her soul. The baby stirred, releasing a faint cry that silenced every doubt. Emma whispered, "Even broken as I am, I cannot walk away." Daniel stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the floor like a warning. Daniel said, "You are clinging to a fantasy. This child will ruin you." Emma's hands shook, her voice unsteady but defiant. Emma whispered, "She is not ruin, she is truth." The nurse stood silently in the doorway, her face pale with unspoken conflict. unwilling to step between them. The baby's cry rose again, louder, innocence demanding attention from those too broken to offer it freely. Emma leaned closer to the crib, her trembling fingers brushing the air above the baby's tiny hand. She whispered, "I may fail, but I will not abandon her." Daniel's fists clenched, his silence boiling with rage. The room became a battlefield, every breath charged with judgment and pain. Emma's voice cracked, her soul flooding with memories of nights spent waiting for a love that never came. She whispered, "I know what it means to be left. I will not let her suffer the same fate." Daniel sneered, his words sharp enough to slice her open. Daniel said, "And what makes you worthy? Brokenness does not make you strong. It makes you dangerous." Emma turned toward him, her eyes shining with tears she refused to release. The baby cried harder, her tiny fists writhing as if reaching for comfort. The nurse finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. The nurse said, "Sometimes, the broken carry love deeper than the whole." Emma lowered her hand to the crib, fingertips trembling against its railing, a choice forming within her chest. Daniel's voice roared through the nursery, shaking the fragile silence. Daniel said, "You were never meant to have her. Do not confuse pity with destiny." Emma flinched, but her gaze stayed locked on the baby's tiny hands. She whispered, "Maybe I was not meant to, but here she is, and here I am." The baby's cry pierced sharper, a sound so pure it broke through Emma's fear. The nurse clasped her hands together, lips quivering with secrets she dared not reveal. Emma's hand finally reached into the crib, her trembling fingers brushing against the baby's fragile skin. The touch shattered her, rebuilding her resolve in the same instant. She whispered, "If fate places her here, who am I to refuse?" Daniel turned away, jaw tight, fury coiling in his silence. The room held its breath, caught between ruin and redemption. Emma gasped as the baby's small fingers curled around her own, the fragile grip more powerful than any judgment spoken. She whispered, "She doesn't know the lies, the betrayals. She only knows she needs someone." Daniel's face twisted, his voice breaking with fury. Daniel said, "If you take her, you declare war against me." Emma did not look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on the fragile child. Emma whispered, "Then let it be war, because I will not abandon her." The nurse exhaled sharply, the sound heavy with sorrow and relief. The baby's cries softened, her breathing evening out, as though comforted by Emma's touch. Silence followed, but it was not peace, it was the stillness before the storm. The silence in the nursery deepened, until the nurse's trembling voice broke it like glass. The nurse whispered, "Emma, you were never supposed to know the truth." Emma froze, her hand tightening on the baby's fingers, eyes darting to the woman with suspicion and dread. Daniel stepped closer, his face pale with rage, his voice sharp as steel. Daniel said, "Do not speak it. You will destroy everything." Emma's voice cracked as she whispered, "Destroy what?" "The lies that bind us." The nurse's lips trembled, her hands clutching her clipboard as though it held her soul. She whispered again, "This child is not Daniel's." Emma's knees weakened, her body reeling, as if the floor beneath her had vanished. She gasped, "Then whose blood does she bear?" The air thickened with secrets pressing against them all like a suffocating fog. Emma staggered back, her breath ragged, her voice breaking with fear. Emma said, "Not Daniel's. Then whose child cries in my hands?" Daniel's jaw tightened, his fists clenched as he spat, "She lies. Do not believe her." The nurse shook her head, her voice barely audible, yet sharp enough to cut through the chaos. The nurse whispered, "This baby belongs to your sister, Anna. She hid her shame, and we were told to bury the truth." Emma's heart shattered, her mind racing with images of Anna's smile, her laughter, her secrets buried in silence. She whispered, "Anna, all along, it was her." The room spun around her, the child's cry growing louder, as though demanding justice for every hidden betrayal. Daniel turned away, his silence screaming with complicity. Emma's chest heaved as the revelation consumed her, her voice trembling. Emma whispered, My sister carried this burden, and you all let me believe it was yours." Daniel glared, his rage flaring. Daniel said, "Do not twist this. I knew nothing." The nurse's voice cracked, her confession unraveling like threads torn from cloth. The nurse whispered, "Anna begged us to hide it. She said no one must ever know. But secrets rot, and the truth claws its way free." Emma's tears blurred her vision, her voice rising. Emma cried, "You left me drowning in lies. You shattered me, and for what? To protect shame." The baby's cry filled the room, cutting through every accusation, the sound of innocence in the midst of betrayal. Emma's hands shook as she lifted the baby from the crib, pressing the child against her chest. Emma whispered, "Anna may be her blood, but fate placed her in my arms." Daniel's voice erupted, his fury barely restrained. Daniel shouted, "You cannot claim her. This truth changes nothing. You will destroy us all." The nurse shook her head, her voice steady now. The nurse said, "The truth cannot be silenced forever. Lies already destroyed what you tried to protect." Emma closed her eyes, rocking the baby gently as the cries softened, her tears falling onto the blanket. She whispered, "Maybe I was never supposed to know, but now I cannot forget, and I cannot let her go." The room fell into a suffocating silence, broken only by Emma's ragged breath. She whispered, "You tried to bury her existence, but she is alive, and so am I." Daniel's rage faltered, his voice reduced to a whisper. Daniel said, "You were never supposed to know. You were never supposed to be part of this." Emma's grip tightened on the baby as she whispered, "And yet, here I stand, holding the one truth none of you could hide forever." The nurse lowered her head, tears slipping down her cheeks, as though mourning the years of deception. The baby's soft whimper settled into quiet breathing, a fragile peace that seemed to defy the storm around her. The walls of the nursery felt colder, heavier, as though the truth itself was now a living presence. The hospital nursery transformed into a courtroom of emotions as Daniel's voice thundered with rage. Daniel shouted, "You cannot claim what was never yours. This ends now." Emma clutched the baby tighter, her tears streaking but her voice steady. Emma whispered, "I will not let her fall into silence like I once did." The nurse trembled at the doorway, her lips pressed shut, as though carrying truths too sharp to speak. Shadows stretched across the walls, amplifying the storm inside them. Daniel's fists slammed against the crib's edge, rattling its fragile frame. Emma flinched but did not yield. She whispered again, "If I must fight every soul here, I will, because she needs me." The baby's cry swelled louder, echoing like judgment, filling the sterile room with unbearable weight. Silence followed, heavy as stone, waiting for someone to shatter it. Emma's defiance ignited Daniel's fury further, his voice cracking under pressure. Daniel said, "You think this makes you strong? You are nothing but a mistake clinging to another's shame." Emma's chest rose and fell in ragged defiance as she whispered, "I may be broken, but broken things can still protect what is fragile." The baby stirred, her whimpers softening as though soothed by Emma's trembling heartbeat. The nurse whispered, "Stop this before the child drowns in your hatred." Yet no one moved, the room suffocating under their silence. Emma's eyes glistened, but her jaw tightened, her strength born not from perfection, but from scars. She whispered again, "She is mine to fight for, even if it costs me everything." The storm broke as Emma stepped toward Daniel, her voice trembling yet unyielding. Emma said, "You may strip me of name, dignity, and family, but you will not strip her of love." Daniel's jaw clenched so tight his teeth ground audibly, his eyes burning with cold betrayal. The nurse whispered, "The truth has already burned the house down. Fighting her will not rebuild it." Daniel turned to her, his glare a dagger, but she did not flinch. Emma's arms tightened around the child, every bone in her body trembling. She whispered, "I was not meant to carry her, but I will, because no one else will." The baby's whimpers softened, the tiny sound filling the silence with fragile peace. Daniel's rage finally erupted, his voice booming like thunder in the fragile room. Daniel shouted, "You cannot save her. You cannot even save yourself." Emma's knees buckled, but she held the child tighter, her tears falling onto the soft blanket. She whispered, "If saving her destroys me, then let me be destroyed." The nurse's hands trembled, torn between silence and intervention, her voice caught in her throat. The baby's cry rose again, louder, echoing through the room as if demanding to be heard above their pain. Emma's heart pounded so violently she thought it might burst. She whispered again, her words laced with fire, "I will stand even if the ground beneath me collapses." Daniel's silence was thunderous, the war waged not with fists but with unyielding souls. The room fell into unbearable stillness, broken only by Emma's ragged breathing. Her arms encircled the baby like fragile armor. Emma whispered, "You can curse me, abandon me, or destroy me, but she will never be left alone again." Daniel's voice cracked, his fury breaking into something rawer. Daniel said, "You were never supposed to know her. You were never supposed to love her." Emma's tears blurred her vision, yet her voice burned with finality. Emma whispered, "And yet I do, and I will never let go." The nurse lowered her head, tears sliding down her cheeks, the truth too heavy to hold any longer. The baby's soft breath steadied in Emma's arms, as though fate itself had chosen her side. The storm of voices had passed, leaving silence that felt heavier than any shouting. Emma cradled the baby, her breath uneven but her arms firm, her heart deciding faster than her mind. Emma whispered, "The world can break me again and again, but I will not let it touch her." Daniel turned his face away, his jaw tight, his silence carrying the weight of retreat and regret. The nurse lowered her gaze, tears dampening her cheeks, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Truth may destroy us, but it may also set her free." Emma's chest rose and fell as she rocked the child gently, her tears mingling with relief and pain. She whispered again, "I never asked for this fate, but I accept it, even if it scars me deeper than before." The air felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter with one wrong breath. Emma said softly, "If she was placed here, then she is mine, no matter what it costs me." Daniel muttered, "You will regret this. She will not heal your brokenness." His words fell flat, powerless against the child's steady breathing in Emma's arms. The nurse stepped forward, her hands trembling, her voice cracking as she said, "No one can rewrite what is written, but you can choose whether this story becomes love or ruin." Emma's lips quivered, her tears falling silently as she whispered, "Then let it be love, even if it ruins me." The child stirred, her small hand pressing against Emma's chest, anchoring her decision with a fragile grip stronger than fear. Emma's body trembled under the weight of choice, yet her arms felt stronger than they ever had. She whispered, "My scars no longer define me. They only remind me why I must never let her go." Daniel's silence thickened the room, his eyes burning but his words trapped behind clenched teeth. The nurse spoke quietly, her voice almost prayer-like. The nurse said, "Perhaps this is redemption, Emma. Not for the lies, but for the love you choose now." Emma's heart ached, her tears refusing to stop, but her voice no longer shook. She whispered again, "Then let her be my redemption, not because I deserve her, but because she deserves me." The child breathed softly, unaware that her small existence had rewritten the fate of everyone in the room. The echoes of confrontation faded into stillness, replaced by the fragile sound of the baby's steady breathing. Emma whispered, "She will not carry shame. She will not live unloved." Daniel's fist slowly unclenched, his breath ragged, his rage hollowed into silence. He muttered, "You cannot change the blood she carries." Emma met his gaze, her voice cutting through the air like steel. Emma whispered, "Maybe not, but I can change the life she knows." The nurse closed her eyes briefly, her tears falling freely as if finally released from years of secrets. The moment felt like a wound and a promise all at once, scars binding them together even as they tore them apart. The nursery no longer felt like a battlefield, but like a graveyard of broken truths and fragile beginnings. Emma stood slowly, her legs unsteady but her grip firm on the child. She whispered, "She is not a burden. She is my choice." Daniel lowered his head, unable to speak, his silence surrendering more than words could admit. The nurse placed a hand over her chest, her voice steady for the first time. The nurse said, "Then let this be the end of lies. Let her story begin with truth, no matter the cost." Emma's tears streamed freely as she whispered, "Then her truth begins here with me." The baby's soft sigh settled against her chest, her presence both fragile and infinite, a reminder that even broken hearts can carry life forward. The hospital nursery felt quieter than ever, the cries now replaced by soft breaths of fragile peace. Emma stood in the center of the room, the baby pressed close, her arms trembling but unyielding. Emma whispered, "I was never supposed to know her, but fate placed her in my lap anyway." Daniel lingered at the edge of the room, his face pale, his silence the last remnant of a battle already lost. His fists hung loose, empty of rage, hollow with regret. The nurse lowered her clipboard, her voice breaking as she whispered, "The truth has broken us, but perhaps it will save her." Emma closed her eyes, her tears falling against the child's soft blanket. She whispered again, "Let her story begin here, even if mine ends broken." Emma's mind spun with the weight of choice and consequence, yet her voice found steadiness born of pain. She whispered, "I was broken, abandoned, and forgotten, but I will not let her be." Daniel's voice cracked as he muttered, "You were never meant to be part of this story." Emma lifted her eyes to him, her face streaked with tears but defiance blazing. Emma said, "Then let this be the story I write with my scars." The nurse stepped closer, her trembling voice carrying finality. The nurse whispered, "Truth always finds its way to the surface. You cannot bury what was meant to breathe." Emma rocked the child gently, whispering, "Then she will breathe free, even if it costs me everything." Daniel's shoulders sagged as though the weight of secrets had hollowed him out completely. He whispered, "I tried to keep the truth buried, to protect what little remained." Emma's tears glistened as she whispered back, "Lies don't protect, they destroy." The nurse closed her eyes, her breath shaky, her silence a confession of guilt that needed no words. The baby stirred softly, her small hand curling against Emma's chest, the fragile grip anchoring Emma's crumbling soul. Emma whispered again, "She doesn't know betrayal or shame. She only knows love when it is given, and I will not take it away." The room felt fragile, as though one more word might shatter what little hope remained. Emma took a step forward, her arms steadied, though her heart ached. She whispered, "This truth is mine now, and she is mine to protect." Daniel's eyes filled with silent rage and regret, but he said nothing. The nurse whispered, "The cost will be high, Emma. Families may shatter. Bonds may never heal." Emma's voice cracked but carried strength as she whispered, "Then let them shatter. But she will never shatter alone." The baby's breathing deepened, her small sigh filling the silence with fragile hope. Emma's tears fell like glass breaking, her heart scarred but no longer empty. The nursery felt like a battlefield of ruins, but also like the beginning of something unbroken. The final silence stretched across the room, heavy, endless, suffocating. Emma rocked the child gently, whispering words that would linger like echoes long after. Emma whispered, "They tried to bury her, they tried to bury me, but I will not be silenced." Daniel turned his face away, his lips trembling, but no words came. The nurse's tears fell unchecked, her silence an apology etched forever in sorrow. Emma's voice lowered to a whisper that cracked the air like thunder. Emma said, "I never wanted to be a mother, until she called me Mama." The final word shattered the silence, lingering like a ghost that would never leave. The baby's soft breath steadied, her presence undeniable, the truth sealed in Emma's embrace.